So joining me today at Nova Lab Studios is Dr. Ashwin Kumar. Dr. Ashwin, thanks for coming.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
Of course. So you are Doctor of Ayurveda, and I have the word down, which also is Vaidya of Ayurveda, which is the Sanskrit way you said of saying it. Vaidya is Sanskrit for doctor.
Correct.
Nice. Okay. I'm glad I got that.
Thank you.
So we've like I mentioned, we've just had a discussion regarding Ayurveda before, but with you we're gonna kind of go with a deeper dive. We're gonna talk about the 5 elements, the 3 constitutions, some of like the common mistakes you see that people make when it comes to diet, lifestyle. But to start, I guess when I came by you, you mentioned you've been doing this like always, right? Like you've been very interested in this for pretty much your entire life.
Yeah. As far as I can recall, growing up, I'm one of 3 siblings, 3 boys in the family. And I'm the one that sort of pursued this with my family's tradition. Both my grandmother, my mother on the maternal side. My 2 brothers didn't follow through after, high school years.
Mm-hmm.
But since at a young age, I became interested in just being around my grandmother, my mother. There was quite a divine connection. A very deep connection. Looking hindsight, I would say it's kind of like a spiritual connection. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed pretty much all my spare time that I would spend after school, after grade school with them. And at first it was just sort of playing around, hanging out with them, helping them clean, helping them do some errands and chores, minor tasks. And at the same time, I was listening to their conversations with their patients, with their customers, and pretty much hanging around a lot with the adults, I guess you can say, in the room. And then I became very interested somewhere around 9, 10 years of age, where I started to actually read some of the texts and started asking questions, in between customers. And then they started assigning to me some tasks, some minor tasks such as preparing some herbal oils or preparing some basic medicines, so not the actual medicines, but the pre-preparation type of,
right.
And sort of being around them, I became very interested through the teenage years, and I got a little bit further in helping them in other responsibilities. And at 17 years of age is when I really took a deep dive and decided to make my preparation to study as an adult. Both in India and in America. And I pursued that under their teachers from India as well. So I started traveling to India 6-7 months at a time. And during the school years, I was traveling during the summers. So I studied in America for 8 months and then 4 months in India.
Wow.
And so I did sort of both, I guess you can say. I spent quite a bit of time studying, basically pursuing 2 education systems, both the Western and the Eastern.
Year round, pretty much.
Year round, yeah, year round. And so it's been a very much in this science we owe everything we acquire to our mother, who is our first teacher, and our father is our second teacher. In this case, it was just aligned with the maternal side pretty much since at a young age. And so they become our first guru. The mother or the teacher becomes, in the family, the father or the mother becomes the first guru, which is the one who removes ignorance and gives you the wisdom. So look, in hindsight, my first teacher was my grandmother and mother. And then their teachers became also my teachers. And also I see them as my guru, and I'm completely devoted to them to this date. Not only as a biological grandmother, but also as a divine teacher. And the same thing with my teachers in India as well. So it's a very much a deeper connection than just a teacher. It's a spiritual connection.
Right.
And so that's how we view this science. And that's how it's learned. It's learned under what we call a gurukulam, meaning a guru and disciple method, or master teacher and disciple method of learning. Almost like an apprenticeship, you can say, by analogy. And it never stops. It sort of continues. And at some point, when the guru is about to transition into a higher realm and leave the body behind, then they assign you a responsibility to take over their responsibility. And that transition is a beautiful transition when they basically hand you the responsibilities to then so that you can pass it on to somebody else later as you age and as you transition yourself. And it's passed down generation through generation this way. Family member to disciple or non-biological family member also can be passed down.
All right. Yeah. Can you give us very high level, what is Ayurveda exactly?
The science of Ayurveda is based on the ancient Vedas, which are 4 old ancient scriptures from India. The word Veda itself means a science or a methodology. And Ayur means life. So the science of life in terms of Ayurveda. And Ayurveda is based on one of those 4 texts primarily, the Atharva Veda. The Atharva Veda is focused on how to live in this material life, how to live in this planet Earth, how to be able to achieve the 4 Purusharthas, which are Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. The 4 Purusharthas meaning the 4 pillars of life. That's why Ayurveda was created. It was created to achieve these 4 pillars. One is what is the righteous duty of each person? Why are you here? And what are you supposed to do? Who are you? Who are you? Who am I? And what am I supposed to do in this life, physical life? Number 2 is the Artha. What am I supposed to do at the physical level? Survival, shelter, food, clothing, bank account, car, nagging wife or no nagging husband, children or no children. That's the second pillar, the actual practicality of the physical world. Number 3 is understanding the unfulfilled desires. Kama, K-A-M-A, Kama. What are the unfulfilled desires that brought me back to this planet Earth? That's holding me attached to this Halloween costume, the body, the mind. What am I here to do and achieve? Usually those are the things that we leave off in our prior life. Before reincarnating in this physical body, we actually have unfulfilled desires, and then we come back trying to fulfill those desires. And the last one is moksha, which is nirvana or samadhi. In other words, becoming enlightened in this life, becoming enlightened in this physical life. But to do that, usually you have to take care of the first 3. What is your purpose in life? Why are you here? Who am I? What am I here to do? And then achieve the physicality of it, as well as understanding the unfulfilled desires. And all of these things we call doing the laundry work. The laundry work so that we can stop doing the laundry and not wanting to come back to do more laundry. We see the planet Earth as a kindergarten of the universe. There's many, many more realms that we can actually transition into. And the spirit, right? The spirit continues. The soul, some people may call it the soul, or the consciousness or the awareness. That continues, drops the body, and goes on and on to something greater, or comes back to the same mouse wheel, to the same kindergarten of the universe, planet Earth, right? So Ayurveda is the science of how to understand all of this in context, and at the same time learn to take care of this physical body, to take care of the physical mind, the lower mind, and to be able to understand the barrier to who you truly are, which is the spirit. And that barrier is called the ego. The ego is sort of a veil between the mind and the spirit. And that veil is really ignorance, because the ego is programmed. It's programmed like a computer is programmed by a programmer. The ego is programmed since a childhood by your mother, father, by society, culture, customs. It's programmed by your friends, the legal system, the social norms, customs of the particular country. And you are being told what to do, how to behave, what to eat, etc. But nobody ever took time to tell that person about their spirit, Why are you here in this planet? And who are you really? As opposed to being told who you are by another ignorant person. And so the ego is the major barrier to discovering who you truly are. Right?
Where does this originate from? Where does Ayurveda originate?
The science of Ayurveda is actually universal principles. You know, it's inherent in the plant, it's inherent in the animal, the dog, the cat. The animal kingdom is inherent in the mineral kingdom. It's universal principles, astrophysics, universal law. It happens to have been discussed and passed on generation to generation in the Indian subcontinent, which at one point, you know, all the continents were clustered together. So it was one group of people. And this science eventually evolutioned into the surrounding continents. And then as the civilization separated, the science got diluted and divided into different groups of people. But the origins are in the Indian subcontinent.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, originally this was translated, and it was passed on generation by generation through the oral tradition. You know, discussing, sharing orally, and listening. Eventually, books became, the last 5, 6, 7,000 years, books became somewhat of the norm. Before books, it was palm leaves. They were written in palm leaves. Wow. And those palm leaves, many of them are still existing today.
They were preserved?
Preserved in different families in India. Wow. Some of them are in the National Museum of India, where they have preserved them. Some of them are still being held at people's homes. So the oral tradition, then it became norm to write some of these things down and pass down those palm leaves, and then the books came more of a norm, and nowadays everything's on books mostly. So this is how it evolved over time. So
this is a Eastern practice. Would that be correct to say?
Yes, we can say it's an Eastern practice. Some of the substance of these practices are still easily seen in the native cultures, in the Aborigines or native cultures of different continents. Whether if it's Native Americans, the Southern Americans like the Incas, or Central Americans like the Mayans. If you go into the ancient African tribes, there's some remnants still in the ancient civilizations of similarities in how they were living as close as possible to the earth, as close as possible to the 5 elements, respecting nature, respecting the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, and living more or less as one. That's sort of the bottom substance, the foundation of Ayurveda, of these sciences, is understanding the 5 elements of the planet Earth and living in oneness with the 5 elements.
And those five elements you're referring to being?
Yeah, the 5 elements, we sort of cluster them together into, space, air, fire, and then earth and water, to be practical. We heavily understand them through the qualities of each and what they exude, the qualities they exude. And these 5 elements can be seen in everything. It can be seen in the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and the atmosphere, the universe. And also the same 5 elements can easily relate to the physical body and the mind. The space element is basically any crevice in the body that is empty. Like for example, the colon has a great deal of space. The space in the ear canal, the space in the tongue, in the mouth, that is the cavity of the nostrils, right? The air element is really seen as movement of the cells, movement of the neurons in the central nervous system, the movement of the circulation in the bloodstream. So the air element, it represents movement, anything that moves within the body, the physical body. The thoughts, for example, in the mind, are part of the air element. So a busy mind represents excess air, creating more thoughts. The fire element is anything that represents transformation, like the hydrochloric acid in the stomach, the digestive enzymes from the liver or the pancreas, the red blood cells, for example, and anything related to the digestive fire. The fire in the eyes, for example, that give us the ability to read light. Okay. Then we get to the water element. The water elements are the bodily systems that contain liquids, like the plasma serum, the bladder, kidneys that metabolize the water that we intake. And then the mineral. The mineral becomes the earth element. Minerals that we take in, calcium, magnesium, zinc, through the food items. Those become the bones, the bone structures, the skeletal system. So these are the 5 elements represented in the physical body, as well as the mind.
Yeah. And then in addition to that, so there we were talking before we started, so there are 3 constitutions as well, right?
Yes. So these 5 elements, we narrowed it down further into 3 clusters. Okay. And we call them doshas, constitutions in plain English. And the space and air element grouped together, they become Vata, V-A-T-A. The second one becomes Pitta. Pitta is the fire element, mostly fire. The Kapha becomes the earth-water element, clustered together. And then we use these 3 to classify the qualities of a person for body, mind, constitution. Some persons may have a predominant dosha, predominant constitution, being fire or being earth-water, etc. But we all have them all. It's just a proportion at birth, at the time of birth of the first breath, that person's natal constitution gets determined. And then any fluctuations away from that become an imbalance. And that imbalance, we call it vikruti. The original natal constitution is called prakruti, or natal constitution. And then the current constitution, we call it vikruti, which is the current status of those 3 doshas, those 3 constitutions.
So you said you're born with that constitution at birth, the makeup of it.
The makeup.
And then if it gets deviated, it's because of some kind of something you've done wrong, some kind of you've like an imbalance. You said. So is that? I'm assuming that's common then.
It's very common. We're never in status quo. We're never in homeostasis, as modern medicine would say. Ever since we take the first breath, the mind starts to wander, the body starts to function, the body starts to, and the mind start to be affected by the environment. And it's going to have ups and downs and irregularities. The very goal of Ayurveda is to keep those irregularities and fluctuations at a minimum, so that it's as close as possible to the natal percentages, the natal constitution. We don't want to have big ups and downs in those, or swings in those 5 elements.
So for you, the way then you already know when I came by you, I think almost immediately you said you're this. This is what you're. Yeah, you're like this is what you are. And I was like, how did you do that? And I think you told me, you're like, ultimately what the person you learned from, you said, I think they told you should know when they come within 10 feet of you what they are. Does that sound right?
That's correct. That's correct. So we are keen observers. We are trained in the art of observation. And when we say observation, it's not just the physical observation, but we use all the senses, and we use the something higher sense. So we are trained also in the something higher sense. The key here is that most analysis can be done physically and analytically through the 5 senses. That's usually the lower level brain or mind that does that work. But the 6th sense can actually connect with the other person. Spirit to spirit goes, as the old saying says. And that's where we get most of the information. 90% comes from that connection, that divine connection. The person may not realize it, the customer may not realize it, that we are connecting at that level, unless they are highly intuitive, unless they're highly developed in that area. They might realize that we don't have to speak a word, that we just have to be present with each other. And with that presence, we can communicate without a single word, without a single nod or look or gesture. And so that reading is what we are talking about. We're reading both the 5 senses through observation, the smell, the taste, and so forth, the touch. But at the same time, we're also utilizing the higher sense. The higher sense is really who we truly are. You are spirit, I am spirit, and we connect at that level.
So how do you, for you being able to do that now, how do you attain that ability? Is that just simply through like your years of practice and then your years of studying, and then is it the actual practice of it? Like, how does that even get attained in the end?
Yeah, so it gets attained actually through practice. There are techniques. There are some basic techniques through yoga. Yoga is a sister science, and it's an inclusive science of Ayurveda. We cannot practice one without the other. And in those techniques, we learn to acknowledge the body through the postures. We learn to acknowledge the prana, which is the breath, experienced through the breath, the life force experienced through the breath, which primarily is able to keep this body alive. Without experiencing prana through the breath, the body quickly decays. But it also has a very direct connection to the mind. To keeping the mind at peace and at ease is to be able to manipulate the breath, to be able to not have so many mind chatter or monkey mind, as some people refer, right? So these two connections are very important to be able to obtain that last connection, which is the spirit. So the postures for the body, the breathing techniques, and mastering the life force to the mind. And then that allows you to realize the divine connection to who you truly are, the spirit. And once you practice these techniques, then you can develop that connection with other people via the spirit, that is, via the divine connection, the pure awareness or consciousness, as some people call it.
You were mentioning earlier regarding the spirit that, like when you're growing up, you're kind of taught that when it's not necessarily like you're supposed to. I think you were saying you're supposed to learn it on your own, right? Whereas like an outside ego might get in the way of it.
Yes.
So I guess from that perspective, as a parent or someone, a guardian, whoever that's raising a child, how do you prevent that? How do you not get in the way? How do you not let that
very good question?
Like I guess like maybe cause an imbalance. I don't know if that's the right way to look at it.
Yeah. So in this science, we understand the process of evolution, from birth to death and beyond. So the first thing that parents should do, there are very much detailed guidance on parenting to answer your question. And that is to first recognize that child, that toddler, it has a divine purpose in this life. It doesn't come to be your object for programming it to be who you couldn't be in your life. Usually a lot of parents get caught up in their traditions, they get caught up in their culture, they get caught up in their ethnicity, their race, their nationality, and they program that child to become just like them. And then they end up programming that child perhaps to follow a career of choice that they couldn't achieve, and so forth. So the first thing the parent needs to realize is that this child may be very different. This spirit that was born in this physical body in the womb of the mother might have a very divine purpose, a very different purpose than the father or the mother. That might completely take them away from their culture, customs, and norms. So that's the first step, is to realize that spirit knows what to do. The spirit knows who it is.
And that's where the ego kind of gets in the way. Huh?
So the father, mother should not tell the child what to do. The child should be led to decide. So the mother and father becomes a facilitator, a moderator throughout the life of the child, not a dictator, not an authoritarian mother-father. You see? So that's the very big difference of how to develop the child to become spirit. Giving them choices, and then that child will know. Somewhere between the ages of 4 and 8 is the golden age for that spirit to shine, so that the parents don't get in the way of that spirit by creating an ego. See? So we should not develop the ego. We should keep the ego as small as possible and the spirit as big as possible. Right?
And so that what you just described, is that prevalent more in a certain part of the world, like that way of parenting, or is it scattered? I'm sure probably, maybe you can confirm or deny it, probably a vast majority are the way you're describing not to do it.
Yeah, a lot of this is gone and it's been diluted over the last 4,000 or 5,000 years. There's very few remnants of civilization left that are practicing these norms. It's slowly coming back. So let's just say that 5% perhaps of these traditions are following that. But it is because of the old ancient traditions or wisdom coming back through yoga, through meditation, through Ayurveda and similar sciences. It slowly is coming back to respecting each other as one, respecting each other as spirit, right? So it's become sort of a common, language these days to use that word, that we are one or spirit, etc. So it's slowly coming back, and it's not fast enough, obviously, but it should be kept as a priority.
So you feel what's bringing it back is like the prevalence of yoga becoming more of a practice thing, meditation becoming more spoken about. Do you think that's what's leading the return of it?
Some of that, yes, but also the Eastern traditions. Some of the Eastern traditions, like Buddhism. Buddhism is actually a philosophy within the Vedic tradition. It's a philosophy that it's part of an inherent part of this tradition, as well as yoga and other Eastern philosophies. There's a very direct connection to some of the Taoism from China, for example.
Oh, okay.
So there is this intimate connection. Even in the pure Christianity from how Jesus used to share his sermons and discussions has a very strong foundation on the essence of yoga. So the essence of Christianity is very firmly rooted on the essence of yoga also. Yeah. There's many passages in the Bible that can be easily, by analogy, compared. For example, be still and know me, right? When God created man and woman out of mud, he breathed into their nostrils, representing prana, the life force coming into the physical, materially created physical body to bring him to life. So that life force is prana. In the Chinese medicine, they named it qi, right? So there's a lot of these parables that have a very strong relevance in the yoga tradition.
But do you think people realize that, like what you just explained from the Bible? Do you think people that study it realize what the explanation you provided, that breakdown, the comparison, that analogy, or people are just unaware to even know that it's that similar, or it's rooted like that? I guess.
Yeah, well, it depends. I think hopefully the current interpreters are becoming a little more flexible and going deeper into the substance of what the meanings are hidden in those parables. So again, because of the Eastern traditions becoming more prevalent in the West, perhaps people are being a little bit more open-minded. Here in America, for example, 1 out of every 5 persons is practicing a form of yoga or meditation. So that's a big chunk of people.
Yeah.
And it's growing at 20% per year on average for the last 20, 30 years. So it is sort of becoming a tool, a resource, a technique to interpret life as a whole, perhaps. And hopefully the Orthodox Christians and other religions don't take offense and see it more as a mirror, or see it more as a tool, as a resource, not to undermine any religion, but to really just be colleagues and be able to share wisdom together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What would you say is like some of the biggest differences with like Western medicine versus Ayurveda?
So the biggest difference, allopathic medicine, which is Western medicine for the last 80 plus years, it's sort of in its infancy stage, just by the number of years. In the 20s and 30s, science-based medicine became prevalent. And science-based medicine follows a scientific approach, a statistical approach, follows a a model of clinical trials, follows a model of proving using a statistical model, using the bell curve. Can we take a blind, double-blind clinical trial and see if it works, whether a therapy or a medicine, and if it works within 95% confidence, and it has minor side effects or less, it helps the majority of that sample of people, then it's a successful therapy or it's a successful medicine. However, they're trying to apply a one-size-fits-all to the population, right? So the tail end of the bell curve may have side effects. And even the population may have side effects to a lesser extent. So that's the scientific model in a nutshell. And I'm not an expert. I'm just, again, using my own analytical knowledge from what I've read. So I may be misinterpreting it. The Ayurvedic model doesn't do that. The Ayurvedic model takes a look at that individual and takes a deep look at that individual of the body and mind composition. And it's going to apply a very individualized approach to the body-mind therapies, medicine, diagnosis, assessment, nutrition, highly based on nutrition, highly based on lifestyle. And if herbal formulas are needed, if any therapies are needed, that is tertiary. It's not the predominant. And there's also the something else, which is how does that person relate to who they truly are? Have they truly found who they are? Are they living their truth? Right? That's the something else. So body-mind is very scientific in Ayurveda. It's a very scientific approach as well. But the main difference is that it's very individualized. Two people may come to Ayurveda with the same signs and symptoms and perhaps the same allopathic diagnosis, but we would treat them very differently. So that's the key difference, is the uniqueness that we realize that every person, every individual may be exuding signs and symptoms, but the actual cause, the root cause may be very different. So we're going to treat them very different. And this is a very important point to bring up, is that Ayurveda, we focus deeply in finding the root cause of the issue or the set of root causes of the issue, in not only treating the signs and symptoms. So not until we find the point of origin and the subsequent aggravations or causes, then we will understand the whole picture. We may have to go to childhood. We may have to go to pregnancy for that individual to figure out what really happened that led that individual to have that disease, that imbalance.
Can allopathic medicine and Ayurveda work together? Is there a way to, can they be work together to be even more effective? Or do you think Ayurveda on its own will suffice and allopathic, it doesn't need to be combined, for example?
Well, nowadays, so the short answer is yes, they can work together.
Is that more effective?
It could be in many situations. It could be, but we have to consider what is the predominance of what is the current situation and what is the true need. So allopathic medicine in general is excellent for emergency situations. It's excellent for surgeries that need to be held and that need to be performed with an urgency in emergency care. So science-based medicine is excellent for the acute situations, emergency situations. Once the emergency is over, chronic situations, Ayurveda does a much better job at that. Ayurveda does a much better job usually at understanding the point of origin, the causes, not only the symptoms and the signs. So there is an integration, and nowadays there are new modern terminologies being thrown around, like integrative medicine, where they are taking holistic-based medicines, approaches or methods like Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, naturopathy, homeopathy, and also allowing that to take place in the hospital setting, along with allopathic. Like in many major hospitals, they have some level of integrated medicine. We also see things like Reiki being performed in hospitals, We see things like yoga therapy being performed in hospitals.
What was the first thing you said? Reiki?
Reiki, which is in our science, it's more of pranacharya. It's energy healing. Energy healing with the hands through the center of the palm, transmitting healing vibrations to that person's body ailment. And being able to relieve a condition, whether if it's symptoms like pain, etc. And so there's this level of integration already taking place at major hospitals in America and in Europe.
Is Reiki effective?
I'm not a practitioner of Reiki, but from what I read, people do feel the benefits. They do feel the benefits at different levels. Again, it depends on the conditions and the set of circumstances. In our system, we have Reiki has been derived from this science of Ayurveda. In Ayurveda, we use marma chikitsa, which is acupressure, which predominantly also Chinese medicine, the acupuncture version of it, follows suit side by side with acupressure. And pranacharya is the energy healing from Ayurveda. Reiki is wholly, mostly derived from this science. So we do use those techniques, but everything has to be done with the right understanding and the right timing. Is it the right approach for this person? It's not a one-size-fits-all.
So when you're saying there's people that have said that it helps them, do you think there's any element of like placebo with that? That's my first part. And the second part is do you have a take on placebo? What would you even consider that? Like the whole idea of what the placebo effect is. I feel like you might have something to say on it. Yeah,
placebo it's a modern word, but I think we have to go back to an old statement that says you cannot heal by faith alone, right? But you will not heal by medicine alone either. Okay, so if you take your medicine with faith, you're most likely to heal. If you take your medicine without faith, then you may not heal. So there is a faith component, which we may say is a placebo effect, right? Through a scientific lens, we may call it a placebo effect. In our science, faith is belief in who you truly are. See? The placebo effect is faith in who you truly are.
So it's part of it. You have, that's a part of it, because like you said, if you're just taking it without any faith, or the placebo, in other words, for here, then it might not work.
Yeah. In a very simple way, if you don't have confidence in something that you're doing, you're not going to do it as well. Right?
Yeah, because when I'd hear, like, I think I was on this boat too, like, where I would consider, or I would hear someone say, well, it's just, what if it's just placebo, or that's just placebo, it's not necessarily working. But then, as I thought about it more, it's like, well, it is working. If it's placebo and it's working, they're feeling a benefit, then it's working. There's no asterisk. It's just, it is. Yeah. It's already, they're benefiting from it.
And maybe we should touch a little bit on Ayurveda.
Yes.
It's a science of healing, self-healing. So we talked about Ayurveda being the science of life. So if it's the science of life, it really takes us to an individualized approach. It's the science of self-healing. Why is it self-healing? Because it's firmly rooted on understanding this body and the mind. It's your responsibility. You as an individual, it's your responsibility to understand this model of this body and mind that you have requested, that you have been living in for a number of years. Especially as an adult, you take responsibility of this body and mind. So therefore, you should understand it. And if you really understand it, then you would understand that this body, this physical body, is a food body. Okay? It's a food body. The accumulation of food becomes muscle, becomes tissue over a period of time through the digestion process. So you must understand digestion. You must understand nutrition. So if this is a food body, then you should understand what foods are conducive to these 5 elements in this body and the constitution of this body. It's like the owner's manual. So in Ayurveda, we give the owner's manual to every person individualized. It's not a one-size-fits-all owner's manual. So if this is a food body, then we have to understand nutrition, and we got to give that wisdom to that person. Number two, we have to understand that the mind, it comes along with the ego. And the programming or misprogramming, usually, of this mind that's running through the five senses, pretty much in control of the body, right? Pretty much determining, deciding, thinking what it should put into this body on a day-to-day basis because of programming. This is the foods that I grew up with, so I will crave them. These are the foods that I learned on my own from friends and colleagues at school. So I'm going to be deciding on those. So the misprogramming at the mind level needs to be reprogrammed. And the ego needs to be shrunk. That's in modern psychologists, they say shrink. In our science, we say shrink the ego as small as possible so that the mind can flow directly with the spirit, bypassing or supervising the ego, so that you make spiritually inclined decisions of what is good for this body and mind without the ego getting in the way. You see? So the science of self-healing is giving you the tools, the techniques, so that you are self-sufficient. Self-sufficient. Not because you have to depend on a doctor of Ayurveda or similar. So the doctor of Ayurveda's goal is to make you self-sufficient.
Right. Yeah. So you don't you don't need them anymore.
So you don't need them. Food as medicine. Food as medicine, lifestyle as medicine. And food and lifestyle as healing.
So with that said, let's go a little more into the three constitutions you mentioned. Can you provide with each one, like what are like the characteristics in individuals like that are predominantly Pitta, for example? You know, you said all the elements are included in a person, but it's the proportionality. So like for people that are dominant in one of those three, what are like the characteristics for each one?
Yeah, so when we look at Vata people, Vata constitutions predominant. Vata is the air and space element. So we have qualities that are usually when we look at somebody visually, you will find a person who is very slim. Vata. Very slim, thin bone, as some people may call them. You may see somebody who may have features of lightness. They may have cold, mobile qualities to them. Cold meaning maybe the extremities are cold, for example. Mobile, their eyes wander a lot. Maybe they're a little spacey. Maybe they learn quick, but they also forget quick. So there's this lightness to them. And typically the features of the Vata person will be mostly on the intuitive side, the creative side. Artists of all types, creative types. Okay. On the second type of person, when we talk about Pitta people, these are the fire people. They are very much the go-getters of our world. They're the ones who get things done. They're driven, self-driven. They use a checklist usually to get things done, and they always want to be on track. They never want to be behind. They usually finish early. They are usually a moderate-sized body, not very thick bone, not very light bone. They're medium-sized features. They have sharp features. The qualities of fire are sharp, hot. So they may be hot-headed. They may be quick to jump to conclusions. They may be very quick thinkers, analytical thinkers. They may also have sharp features in the face in terms of a sharp nose or sharp angle of the chin, for example. Small eyes, but fiery eyes. They may suffer from dry, hot eyes quite often. And they are the ones who tend to be workaholics, very focused, extremely focused, whereas the Vata people are more forgetful and they lose focus. The Vata person may start many projects and not finish one. The Pitta people may finish all of them and they want more. They also tend to be a little more impatient, irritable, whereas the people who are Vata, they may be a little more anxious and nervous and can't sit still. They may need to get up and move quite a bit. They may need to fidget quite a bit. Whereas the Pitta people are very focused. And the Pitta people tend to run a little hotter temperature-wise. They may sweat a little more. And their hands would always be warm, for example, versus the Vata people, they may be on the colder extremities. Then we get to the Kapha people. The Kapha people are the heavy-set people. Thick bone. They tend to have potential changes of having overweight or obesity. And they tend to have very oily skin or much more supple skin. They're also going to be enjoying types of professions perhaps that are monotonous or that require more of the sitting type, more stability.
Like an accountant.
Like that, yes. Or somebody who's doing some kind of back office work.
Sure.
They're not too fond of being out in the public's view. Like the Vata people are more of the creative, extrovert. Pitta people are sort of in the moderate area where they can handle both sides. And the Kapha people, the heavy-set people, the earth and water people are really more on the, I want to be behind the scenes. Okay. They also tend to have more of the soothing qualities of TLC, tender loving care people. They're very much a tender loving care. They're huggable. They're always looking out for their friends and family. They're always the ones that are making everybody else feel comfortable and at home, right? So this is sort of a generality.
Sure.
We all have all of these qualities, but at times we may be using more of some. Mm-hmm. And that takes us back to the natal constitution, right? Which is the predominant feature.
So you can still tell, like someone that practices like yourself. So obviously you don't see each person that comes from when they're born, but just how their physical, how their appearance is when they first approach you. Yes. You're still able to tell what it was from when they were born. Right. So that is a very much a knack that requires a lot of experience to
even
develop
if they've
that.
deviated, you can still tell.
You can still see the traces. You can see the traces of what they should be versus what they are today.
That's fascinating.
What they should be is the natal constitution. So we are trained to see both what it is that's out of balance. See, for example, a Vata person, the air space person, even though they're small boned, they may have some kind of disorder that they allowed them to gain weight. So they may be chubby, let's say. But in reality, the natal constitution is to be thin bone and very thin or slim. So we have to be able to deduct the out of balance to get back to the original. And that does require, obviously, years of training and practice. And that is the beauty of this science, that if we were to judge, for example, that person who has gained weight, but they are supposed to be on the slim side, we would not treat them the same way as somebody who was thick bone and heavy set from the very beginning. We would treat them very differently.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
But, so, okay, this might be a stupid question, but I have to ask it. So if you're thick boned and you're thicker set, shouldn't you want to be skinnier? Isn't it better to be skinnier?
No.
Can you define thick set? I'm thinking fat when I hear thick set.
Yeah, so obese or overweight.
Okay.
See, there's some people that are always going to be a little bit heavier set.
A little bit
compared to the other two categories, Vata and Pitta. So we cannot expect that person to be as slim as the Vata constitution, which is air and space.
Sure, but I'm saying, like, if you're obese, I mean, you should try and get.
Of course, yeah.
But there's a certain point you're saying that, like, this is as good as it's gonna get.
Right.
Okay.
But they're still gonna be relatively thin.
Right. It's just not as thin as someone that's thin bone.
Somebody, for example, who is 5'2" and is Vata, they may weigh 98 pounds. Somebody who's 5'2" and his Kapha, they may weigh 115, 120.
Okay, got you.
Right. So we will have that range, and because we also don't want to go below that and become unhealthy.
Right.
See, that person who's 115, 120 and 5'2" in height cannot, if they could lose weight and go down to 98 pounds, but it's going to be unhealthy for their body style, for their body mind constitution. right? So we don't want to go too far in one direction or the other. Yeah, we want to find that original fit.
That's just so fascinating.
And this is the beauty of understanding that this is how we order the Halloween costume, this bodily costume.
Right.
And we have to love it and take care of it the original way, the intended way. Every soul, every spirit pre-ordered this Halloween costume, the physical body and mind. It was requested. It was requested from the mother and father before the sexual act, before conception. But we forgot about it. Because we have to use this as a resource for our unfulfilled desires from the past life. See? If your unfulfilled desires from the past life was to be a basketball player, then your Halloween costume is going to be a tall, slanky Halloween costume. If your desire was to be a wrestler, then maybe it'll be shorter or medium size and more stocky, etc. So we have to realize why we requested this Halloween costume, why we requested this body-mind constitution. There's some set of purposes, higher level, of why we are here today.
Right.
And the other point is that we are all unique. In Ayurveda, out of these 7.5 billion people on this planet, every one of them is very unique. There's not one exactly the same.
That's what I found fascinating. So when I came by you, when we were talking, you were saying each constitution has like a nutrition plan, like you said, the food is the medicine. And then you provided me the sheet that said what's good for which one. And then I'm looking, I'm like, wait, the ones I want to eat aren't in my category.
Right.
So it's fascinating to know that for, again, like the thin-boned person, I don't know, this one thing might be good. That same exact thing that's good for this one person, the thick-boned person eats, and it's not good for them.
Right. This is see what happens is like there's this concept of like attracts like.
Yes.
And in Ayurveda, this is a very deep and intimate topic. If the inertia of choosing the wrong food habits, the wrong lifestyle, eventually will become a routine, and that routine will become a habit, and that will become an inertia, a circle of influence over the body and mind that cannot be broken. It's too difficult. And that will keep that person a slave to keep eating the wrong things all the time, and they feel it's always been the case. See? So somebody who likes spicy food, for example, and it's a fire constitution, a Pitta constitution, that eating jalapenos and chili peppers and sriracha eventually will catch up to them and create peptic ulcer, create heartburn, create acid reflux, create irritable bowel syndrome, create loose stools, going to the toilet as soon as you eat the food or halfway through eating the food, you go 2-3 times to go poop and defecate. See? So this person will have a tendency to continue to eat spicy food over a period of time, maybe half their lifetime, until they hit the age of 35 to 40 years of age and they hit the wall. And at that age, they're going to say, I'm just getting older. The Western adage is to say, I'm just getting older, right? And then they get to an Ayurvedic physician who's going to tell them, you should stay away from these things. And they're going to say, well, I've been eating all these things and I've been craving all these things all along. And that's why we're here with this condition, with this ailment, with this body disease, because of too much of that shouldn't have been added to the body. When it's a fire constitution, why do we want to add more fire? In this case, chili pepper, jalapeno, and sriracha, right? Whereas the people who have earth water, they can utilize perhaps a little more of that. They need a little more fire. But because they have earth and water, they've been attracted to like attracts like, which is what? Candy, cookie, chocolate, cake, chai, and coffee. And having candy, cookie, chocolate, cake, coffee, and cake, and chai, for example, will cause them to gain weight. It's earth, water. Earth, water is the heavier elements, right? And that's all they've been eating all their life. That's all they know. So they're also going to say the same thing. These are all the things that I like, and these are all the things that I've always eaten. So why do you want to take them away from me? So they should have been eating more astringent, greens. They should have been eating more dried foods, lighter foods, and more spicy foods, more heat to melt away the water and the minerals, the earth. So this like attracts like is a big issue in our society. Like attracts like. Yes, birds of the same feather will hang out together. Same thing. Same thing. Same thing. The friends you hang out with will determine who you are, perhaps in the not so good way. The same thing, sriracha and jalapeno and chili peppers. The same thing in the food sense. So friends and foods and habits and routines become and have this inertia, this like attracts like, that needs to be broken. That needs to be broken.
One of the biggest obstacles with this, in my opinion, and I'd like to know your take on it, is, but by this I mean the whole concept of one size does not fit all when it comes to what you're eating, right? Because before I came to you, again, I think this is with a lot of people, specifically here in the United States, is you'll see like a new study came out showing too much, X amount of coffee is actually beneficial for you. Or a study shows 2 tablespoons of whatever is good for you. So people see things like this, and then this information gets passed along, and there's all these studies, and then you're reading your textbooks, and your health class comes, and they're telling you, you got to have 4 cups of vegetables and 3 cups of fruits, and the triangle, right? The nutrition triangle or whatever it was that has how much dairy you should have and all this. So you're already conditioned. I guess,
Right.
You're already conditioned, right? Like, this is the numbers you should be hitting. This is, again, that one size fits all. Everyone should be having this much of this and that much of that and this much of that. So then if someone runs across someone like you or you specifically where you're like, actually, no, you are eating, this measurements that the triangle is saying, when you shouldn't even be having dairy at all, for like not a single ounce of dairy. You shouldn't even be eating fruit. You should be stacking up on vegetables. And this person, their entire life has already been told, no, I got to abide by this. And now now I'm being told, actually, that's not the right way. It's not, everyone doesn't need to be eating the same thing. It's specific to you. Is that one of the biggest obstacles that you think is to kind of get past this way of thinking, this way of diet and lifestyle?
Absolutely. A very good point. There's a lot of fad diets. See, in today's society, it worked for somebody. Some diet worked for somebody.
Keto.
And
whatever.
then, keto, paleo, South Beach diet, etc. Vegetarian, veganism, flexitarian, and so forth. It doesn't mean it's for everybody, because in the Ayurvedic concept, we look at everybody individually. We look at percentages, micro percentages of the 5 elements, and we customize the approach. We customize the approach not only to the natal constitution, but to the current imbalances that have caused the problem. So there is a short-term 3, 6 months, 9 months, 1 year outlook on what to restrain from having. And then there's the long-term food habits to keep going forward with. So we look at both the current constitutional imbalances of what caused the problem, stay away from those things. And in the long run, you may be able to go back to some of them in moderation. So everything's customized. Yeah, everything's customized. We cannot say that paleo is for you and keto is for you. We don't have a one size fits all. So we always, as a deliverable to the client, we always give them a food list of specific items to stay away from for X amount of time. And some of them may be on for the rest of their life because that's part of their natal constitution. And some of them they can go back to with moderation. So it's a customized approach.
Yeah. With the constant, well, part of it, like, do you ever have issues? I don't know if convincing, I guess, when it comes, like, let's say someone comes to you. Do you ever have people that are skeptical when they find you, they learn of you, or someone recommends them to come to you, and then they sit down and then you tell them, okay, you're Pitta, this is what you shouldn't need, this, that, and then they're sitting like, hey, looking like, I just met this guy. What is he telling me? Do you ever run into that?
All the time. However, we are sort of the last stop in many people's journey to healing.
So they've already hit the wall.
They have hit the wall everywhere else, and they're looking for some last resort. However, there are some partners or couples, girlfriend, boyfriend, or husband, wife, where one of them is very scientific, and the other one is obviously coming to us with an open mind. And so yeah, about half the time we get some of these characters, if I can call them characters, which we love as well, by the way, because Ayurveda is very scientific. Body, mind side is very scientific, but we also have the plus more. We have the spirit concept, which is not as scientific as some people would want it to be.
Right. That's honestly one of the harder parts for me personally too, is the spirit side of it.
And so we can sort of make sense at some point with these people. It may take a little longer. Yeah, it may take a little longer.
But from your position, like when they come and then if they seem, again, the skepticism, or they're kind of not combative, I don't want to sound aggressive, but like they're kind of pushing back.
Oh no, if they're pushing back, if I may add, this is not a science. We don't expect people to come to us. We expect them to come to us with an open mind,
right?
Or not to come at all.
Okay, so if they come and they're already kind of,
if they're if they have a preconception, and it's okay for us if they go and they don't come back. This is not for everybody at this stage of life. At this stage in the millennium, it's not for everybody. We see the current stage in this millennium, in the last thousands of years. We see this stage as a transition that we're in. Since the year 1700 until now, we're in a 400-year transition where we are leaving behind the physicality, the brutality, the materialistic society, and starting to awaken to a higher consciousness. It's a 400-year transition. So there is this crowd who are still in the old habits of this physicality, the scientific only. And then there's the other half who are trying to awaken to some higher consciousness. So we're not gonna hurry up those people. We're not gonna rush them. When they're ready, they will come back, and they do. They do. Usually, it's a matter of months. Usually, those scientific people will eventually have an enlightening effect or an enlightening situation in their life that awakens them. Usually, we call it the school of hard knocks. Will awaken them to something, some other possibility. And that other possibility will become Ayurveda in their life.
One of the characteristics you mentioned, I think, did you say for Vata was like they can sometimes be a little more anxious?
Yes, anxious, nervousness, anxiety, nervousness, and fear are the cornerstones of the Vata airspace constitutions,
right?
The thin bone people.
Okay, so like anxiety, I'll hear about as something that's kind of trending. I don't know if you've heard this.
Yes.
I don't know if you've noticed it, right?
Yes.
And you mentioned again, food is your medicine. So with your corrected diet, is that enough to remedy anxiety? Is it not maybe not on its own, but is that like a big driver too? So is what people are putting in them causing them to have anxiety?
Absolutely. It's not everything, but
right.
It's a portion. It's a large portion. For example, in this, there's a lot of things going on aside from the pandemic that we're dealing with. But there's a lot of society habits that have been built in the last 50, 60 years. Excess screen time, excess going to sleep late, excess waking up and getting up early, or not early but on time. The excess caffeine, excess energy drinks, excess boosters of all kinds, excess recreational things like marijuana and so forth, and other paraphernalia like loud music.
Really, loud music too.
A strong scents like perfumes and colognes. A strong taste like spicy, very spicy foods, very salty foods, crunchy, munchy of all kinds. Excess sweets. So we are misusing the senses through this too much excitement in our life that we want to build and keep it high all the time. See? We are underusing, or we are overusing the senses. So these three categories: underusing, overusing, or misusing the senses. Okay? And this leads to these ups and downs. Because if we underuse them, then we want to keep them underused. If we overuse them, we want to keep overusing them, like stimulants. We want to always keep high.
Mhm.
And when we are not high, then we are not happy. And we are misusing them, so we want to keep misusing them. And when we are not misusing them, then that drives us into being unhappy and dissatisfied. So these three levels of the senses is what's driving the anxiety, nervousness, and so forth. It's also driving depression. Depression typically is the opposite of so-called happiness. Right. It's one and the same coin. Happiness and depression or sadness is the same thing. Whereas if you are balanced, you're right in the middle. If you are balanced, you're right in the middle. You don't get too excited and you don't get too depressed or sad. See? If you are deemed to get too happy easily, that means you get too overexcited easily. That means you're going to crash at some point. Unless you keep trying to maintain that. And to try to maintain that will drive nervousness and anxiety to keep at that level. You see? So the real cure, if I can call it a cure, more like regaining your balance, is to be in the middle.
Right.
To be more equanimous, to be more balanced. Don't overuse, misuse, or underuse the five senses. Yeah.
So this might, what you just ended with might answer this, but I still want to ask it. So when you said, you kind of mentioned stimulants like alcohol, drugs, whatever. So again, this is kind of goes back to what I was saying about like study finds this is in this amount is good for you, whatever. So like red wine or wine, I don't know anything about wine, but like wine, you know, I've heard and people will say, right, a glass every, I don't know, whatever the amount of time is actually good. You know, I don't know what the medicinal thing behind it is. Is there any, in your opinion, is there any merit behind that? Or is it, again, depends on the constitution, or for anyone, it's a no-go? Just don't do it.
Well, I mean, there is a level of moderation, right? There's a level of moderation, and there are some benefits to a type of wine. You know, the cooling wines perhaps can be utilized by half a glass or a glass. It's okay because it does actually at some level promote digestion and appetite.
But that again depends
to be able
on the
to
person,
digest
right?
those foods. It depending on the persons, right? If somebody is already too aggravated, they're out of balance, it may not be the best thing. But if somebody has regained their balance, they're able to keep, sort of in that realm, then they can have a little bit of that with their dinner and so forth. So again, if somebody's out of balance, the question is that going to aggravate or not aggravate the situation further, right? So everything has a time and place in our science. And through professional advice, that person can learn to self-maintain, to self-moderate. Because at the end of the day, we do want people to be self-standing, to be self-sufficient, right? So that then they will know, okay, today I have a little bit of heart reflux. I should not have that red wine or white wine, right? If I am having loose stools, when I went to the number 2 or defecation in the morning, I should not have that wine today. It's just going to aggravate the situation. If I'm having a skin rash, pimples, or acne, I should not have that red glass of wine. You see? So we learn that we are walking that fine line and we have crossed that threshold. So this is the wisdom that Ayurveda brings to that individual, to be able to know that today I cannot do that, tomorrow perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned it's evolving, so it's literally day to day. This fight of keeping that balance. So it's not just a matter of it'll be fixed. It's a active. You have to take these actions daily to ensure you're keeping yourself, like you said, not to any one direction. You're keeping yourself balanced.
So if you do this little exercise, for example, when you're about to wake up in the morning, you're still in bed, you're just becoming cognizant that you're about to wake up, and you check in without moving the body, without opening the eyes, and ask internally, how is this mind feeling? How is this body feeling at this moment, which is about to wake up? And you check in, and what are the first responses that you get? Is there pain? Is there numbness? Is there anger, irritability, sadness, grogginess? You do a self-analysis at that moment, because at that moment is the purest time before you actually move, before you get the mind too chattery. You see? If you do that little exercise, you will get to know a little bit every day of what it means to be body, mind, and something greater, or body, mind, and spirit. See? The observer at that moment is the spirit. And just like a good mother, father, getting their children to go to school every day, then at that moment, the spirit, the true you, can observe the teenager, the ego and the mind, that is groggy or sad or depressed and doesn't want to get up, wants to sleep in more. Or maybe the body has an ailment, a pain. Those are the children. The body consists of 4 trillion children, 4 trillion cells. The flesh and bones is 4 trillion cells on average. And each one knows what to do. Each one knows to eat, to defecate, to urinate, to digest, to sleep. And who is controlling those 4 trillion children? The one teenager. The ego and the mind is running amok, usually on people's body, putting in the wrong foods, deciding, thinking, and requiring those cells to do more than they should, to do the wrong functions, putting in the wrong foods, the wrong lifestyle, the wrong drinks. So they've been left home alone. Okay? The spirit is not connected. The teenager, the ego and the mind is running amok with the 4 trillion babies of the body. So that checking in at that moment in time, you can actually begin the self-healing process by taking over and control and not leaving that body and the mind alone, home alone with the ego. Not for another day. This day, today, I will do something better. Even before I get out of bed, I will check in. You see? And that checking in actually will become a habit on every activity throughout the day. Okay? As soon as you get out of bed, you go with that consciousness, with that alignment of body, mind, and spirit to go shower, to go brush your teeth, to get dressed, to cook your breakfast, to eat the breakfast, with that same consciousness of who is eating, who is chewing, who is digesting, who is cooking, who is cleaning, who is driving to work. Or is it just a robotic ego and mind doing the same old habit mindlessly, mechanically? You see? So doing this little exercise in the morning and keeping that alignment of body, mind, spirit will prevent people from running like a zombie. Just another routine every day, like a little mouse wheel, repeating the same routine, mindlessly. I should say spiritlessly. It's more applicable, spiritlessly. Okay. Because it is mindlessly, it's actually the ego is running the show. The ego is just programming, it's a robot. 8 billion people on this planet are running like a robot. And that's why there's so much conflict. There's so much conflict individually with that person that they can't stand themselves. And at the same time, they project those issues onto the other, the neighbor, the neighboring country, the neighboring county, state, and so forth. Their partner, husband, wife, nagging husband, nagging wife that they have to live with. But it's really the interior that's burning up. The inner relationship of this body, mind, and something greater is not functioning. And 8 billion people are running mechanically. See, they do the same old habit, same old routine daily, day in and day out. Most people eat between 5 and 10 dishes 90% of the time of food. People are creatures of habit, but they don't know any better. Okay? It's interesting to ask people what they eat, and they're going to tell you they eat this breakfast. They usually have 3 breakfasts, 3 lunch plates, and 3 dinner plates, and that's usually the majority of their food. Why? Same thing with they might have a closet that's huge, and they're using only 5 to 10 pieces of clothing all the time. They're driving to work in the same old route. They're going to their desk and they're sitting in the same old way. They're talking to their customers and vendors and colleagues the same old way. Instead of improving, instead of trying to do something better every day. So people become a mouse in a wheel, playing the same old tune. So this connection that I'm trying to describe early morning before you get out of bed is reuniting the inner family, reuniting the spirit, observing quietly the ego and the mind so that it looks everything fresh. It looks everything as a new opportunity for something greater, for an infinite possibilities. See? So the real self-healing is this connection. The real self-healing is this connection. This is what we call enlightenment, self-realization.
Right.
This leads us to moksha or nirvana, as Buddha said.
That's the fourth pillar, correct?
Yeah. This little analysis, self-analysis, self-inquiry, contemplation of what is really taking place here. Who am I? Why am I here? Is the real answer to the individual's solutions, problems. And this is a microcosm. One person is a microcosm of the greater. Yeah? That's the old adage of, the world is me and I'm the world. So if you want to understand the world and the universe, you have to understand here first, because it's the same analogy.
Right.
Yeah. And the same thing before going to bed. 5-10 minutes before going to bed, we need to analyze who is in charge? What happened? Who am I? And what is this body and mind? What happened during the day? And put it into context, into these 3 categories, body, mind, spirit. What happened during the day? And I'm going to put it behind so that I can put this body, 4 trillion babies to sleep, this teenager to sleep, so that I can be free in the night. And allow it to rest peacefully. Put in all the insults, put in all the drama of trauma. Drama leads to trauma, or trauma leads to drama. You put it all behind what happened during the day before you go to bed. So that the body can rest, the mind can rest, like a rock, without disruptions, without getting up in the middle of the night with nightmares, or sleeplessness, or insomnia. We don't sleep. Many people don't sleep. They go to sleep for 2 hours, they wake up in the middle of the night for no reason, they can't go back to sleep. Because they have so much laundry to do of all these old conflicts they haven't resolved within themselves and others. They're home alone. And that creates a lot of issues. It leads to anxiety, nervousness, depression, irritability, anger, and so forth. See? So this little exercise of disconnecting and connecting in the morning and the evening is very important. And then it should be practiced as a second muscle reflex, as a natural muscle reflex in all activities. Who is in charge doing the work? Who is in charge doing the chores? Who is in charge playing? Who's in charge going to a party? And so forth. That same divine connection must be always present. And that always present leads us to the point, be here now. Always be here now. Be present at all times. The spirit. Always be engaged in the present moment. Don't be thinking about the past. Don't be stuck in a rut in the past or worrying about the future. See? So this little exercise has a much bigger realm and return on investment. This little exercise is the key of be here now. And if you're here now, the future will take care of itself. It's okay to plan for the future. It's okay to budget for the future. But at some point, you need to stop budgeting and planning. You need to actually do something.
Right.
And that doing something is being present. And that being present in body, mind, and spirit, wholeheartedly, 100% focused, is the real solution. That's health.
When we were speaking a little earlier, I asked you, like, you have people that ever come with hesitation or if they have any pushback, and then you said, if that's the case, then it's not the time for them at that moment. But everything you just said, and frankly, even everything you've said up to this point too, is there a, like, if it could be, if all this could be relayed by the correct person to people at a younger age, would that work? Or is it still something that you can't put at that point? Because again, to kind of go back to what you were saying, that person that came to you that was not fully on board, it wasn't their time yet. Can you determine that time? Can you already start teaching at a younger age, and then, you know, everything you just shared, word for word, you do that at a younger age? Would that work? Or even then, it might be like, it's not.
No. It's never too late. It's never too early.
Okay.
Never too late. Never too early. For example, I had a young couple in their late 30s. One is a medical professional, scientific based medicine.
Interesting.
And the other partner has been a customer of mine.
Okay.
Okay. And they have a child that they wanted to take care of, to help. But they disagree heavily on whether if it should be Ayurveda or if it should be allopathic, modern Western-based medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So they both came to me and they sat in front of me, and it was obvious that I was sort of just listening to their ongoing rattling. and then he asked me obviously what it was about, so I shared with him, and he wanted proof that what my proposed solution for their child was going to work. He wanted proof. He wanted a guarantee, a warranty, a guarantee that it's going to work.
Sure.
And obviously there's no such thing. And I didn't want to upset them, especially him, because in my mind I was thinking the real problem with your child is both of you. You can't get along. And it's 30% emotional in your child and 60 or 70% physical in your child. And you both are the problem. If you guys fix yourselves, your child will be healthy. How do you tell the parents that? Right? There's ways to say it, obviously, but it wasn't the right timing. So after an hour and a half of them bickering in front of me and me entertaining them for, maybe a third of that time by my discussion and educating him a little bit on Ayurveda, I knew that it wasn't the right time for him to decide that Ayurveda was the best thing for his child. He needs at least one more session. He needs at least more time for him to go back and research what Ayurveda is about. See, I am sure I can prove it that he went back and he probably went back home and started to research that condition that his child has and what Ayurveda can do. And he's probably looking for clinical trials. He's probably looking for medical journals that have proven scientifically what I mentioned to him, because he wants that scientific analytical mind satisfied.
I can relate to that. I feel like I would probably be asking similar questions.
So he's probably deep in the trenches the last few days, researching, trying to prove this discussion we had. Distrustful, right?
I don't know if it's distrustful.
In a nutshell, no, it's distrustful in our sense of analyzing this.
Sure.
Right? It's not distrustful in that he's not doing his due diligence. Everybody should do their due diligence. Because the same question, how can you guarantee that an allopathic drug is going to work? Can you go to a doctor and say, I want to guarantee that this is going to work?
That's a good
Can you
point.
prove to me that this drug is going to work?
Right.
Nobody can do that. Not even allopathic medicine.
Correct.
Right? Again, it works for the bell curve, and it's going to work with a lot of side effects, typically. So again, this is the ego. This gentleman has been programmed to think like a box, like a Swiss engineer with a Rolex watch, and not be open to something higher, not be open to what it really means to have health, right? So he's been programmed. The ego has been programmed, right? So we have to shrink his ego. And when his ego shrinks, then he will be open to body and mind without the ego, you see? The ego is the veil. The ego is ignorance, because it's been programmed XYZ. And if it doesn't fit XYZ, nothing else matters. You see? So the ego keeps being programmed by another ego, and the other ego gets programmed by the other ego. Generation after generation after generation is the blind leading the blind. You cannot fit wisdom in a book. See? So these types of people have knowledge from books. They have a certificate on the wall. They have knowledge from books. And they expect those things to be reperformed like the book says. And if it doesn't happen like the book, then they don't believe it. But that's not wisdom. See, wisdom is much higher than that. You see the big picture. Whereas they see the book. So the school of hard knocks is going to come to this gentleman's door when his child hits a darker time in his life. You see? When he has exhausted all the medicine systems, when he has exhausted all the medical scientific treatments, he's going to realize that, well, let's give it a shot. And in the meanwhile, his child's health is going to deteriorate. Right? So that's an example of this situation.
Sure. So for people that lean towards like wanting a medical profession, and then let's say someone that's aspiring to do that knows of Ayurveda, is interested in Ayurveda, so now they want to practice that. That's what they want to go towards, as opposed to the traditional allopathic path. Is there a recommendation you give? Like, is there a best place to go to learn? Is it kind of like how there's schools here, like the best medical schools are this X, Y, and Z? Is there a similar thing, in your opinion, for people that want to study Ayurveda?
The best, there's two ways of looking at it. In the last, since the 70s, 60s, 70s, a degree was developed in India, for example. An educational 5.5-year degree. And that's a bachelor's in Ayurveda medicine and surgery, BAMS.
So you can actually,
in a university setting, and you get a diploma and so forth, and you do a 1-year internship. That's what happened in India in the 60s. Before the 60s, this system was learned under an apprenticeship method. You found a teacher, a guru, that would want to take you under their wings, and you would practice for 21 years under their belt. Okay? 7 years in the forest, learning the plants, 7 years in the books, learning the theory, and 7 years practicing under your master teacher
7
as an
years
internship.
In the forest.
Okay? And then you would, go on your own. And you start at 8, 9 years of age. So when you're 29, 30 years of age, you graduate. Okay? And they shrunk all of that into 5.5 years, a university degree, since the 70s, 60s. So can you fit that many years into a 5.5-year program? The other thing that happened is in this 5.5-year program, the 4.5-year program with a 1-year internship, 5.5 years. 2 years of that is modern medicine. 2 years of that is science-based medicine, allopath. And 2.5 is true Ayurveda. So you're getting 2.5 years of Ayurveda and 2 years of modern medicine in a 4.5-year degree. So the expectation is very different. And perhaps the results may be very different from what Ayurveda was before the 60s, in that small group of practitioners and Vaidya, doctors, learning the traditional way versus the university way. So come 10 years after that, in the late 70s and 80s, one of my gurus and teachers came to America, and he established an institute here, and Ayurveda started to flourish in the Western Europe and in America. And here, for the most part, the last 40 years, there's a 2-year program that's being promoted. In the last 10 plus years, there's a doctor degree program that's being promoted. Okay. And there's a 1-year nutrition lifestyle consultant certificate. So there's a 1-year lifestyle certificate program. There's a 2-year practitioner program, and a 5.5-year equivalent to what the Indian BAMS degree is here in America and in Western Europe. So there are several institutions where people can learn at these 3 levels. but it's not the traditional way. The traditional way. So I think to set the right answer to your question is, you must decide, is this within my dharma, righteous duty overall in this life to study this science? Is this the purpose of my life? Because if it is, then you dedicate your whole life to it. You deep dive. Close your eyes and you deep dive and you go at it like there is no tomorrow, right? And so don't think about a degree. Don't think about a paper on the wall. That's what I'm getting at. So there's many avenues to learn through small colleges, certificate programs. There's about 10 of them here in America, including my little college. And then go at it. Number 2, find your true self. Find your guru, find your master teacher who's going to sort of moderate you, facilitate your wisdom within in this same science. Right? Guru, disciple method, teacher, disciple method. Find somebody to cling on to. Because those 2 years or that 1 year or that 5.5 year degree is not going to be enough. You got to keep a relationship ongoing to develop a mastery of this science. Okay? So that's sort of the way to approach it. To approach it in the current available formats. Yeah.
So if you can, your opinion is it's best to, like you said, just fully dive into it. Because again, I mean, just the numbers you ran, how it used to be by apprenticeship for 21 years versus now how condensed it's become.
Right.
Just looking at it like that, you can already take away, well, not probably, it's better. You know, I think in general, apprenticeships are better option than schooling, because in my experience, the schooling I've done, like I studied finance. What I studied was good to know, but once I started working, in the couple of years I've been working since I graduated, it's like almost none of the things I learned in school are translating to that. You know, my point being, you know, had it been like a apprenticeship where you go under an accountant, for example, and you work with this person X amount of time per week for 2 years or whatever, that 2 years of actually doing the work like that is going to be different than the actual academic setting, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
So imagine if you have 21 years of that, where you're going to be as the person practicing it versus someone who goes to, let's say, even the one in India, where you go really 2.5 years of actual Ayurveda.
Right.
You know, who's going to take away more and who's going to actually be able to, who knows it better, who can practice it better, if that's a good way to phrase it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that is the way to look at it, is long term. And actually, as part of, in Ayurveda, we follow a not only an application process of somebody applying to learn the science. We have to use discernment, consciousness or higher level discernment. Is this person really meant for this science or not? And so some people may not like that approach, to be told this is not for you. Or maybe the 1 year program is for you, the 2 year program and beyond is not for you in this life. Some people may get upset, may get irritated and insulted by a teacher telling a student, a potential student, this is not your science. So it is a consideration also for the potential student to keep an eye and to keep an open mind that they should explore and see if it's really for them. You know. Yeah. Because if it's not for them, they will struggle.
Right.
They will struggle. Because it requires that something else. It's not only the 5 senses, it requires a little more to be successful in this practice. Right? And that's what I mean by purpose in life. Is this intended to be your purpose in life?
Understood.
Yeah. But even the basic first year is for everybody, really. Understanding nutrition, lifestyle, and how this mannequin, how this Halloween costume works, how the computer of a mind works, and how the ego can manipulate the 5 senses and the mind. That is for everybody. That is for everybody.
Okay. Well, Dr. Ashwin, I'll leave you with one final thing. I told the same thing to Elizabeth. I was like, I feel like I can go on for hours about this, but maybe with another time we can go into even more different things too. So, if there's one thing that you think can apply to anyone? Not just any of the constitutions, any of the 5 elements. One thing that you think people that could already set people in the right direction. Is there something you could advise that would be a good start to at least improve whatever
Sure.
you think is like a main thing?
Well, I want to thank you for bringing me to this program and allowing me to
course,
share
thank you.
some of my passion for these topics. The basic concept is understanding who you truly are. I know it may seem a little bit fancy for some people, maybe secular, etc., but who are you and why are you here are the 2 eternal questions that we must ask ourselves daily. And we have 100 years on average to figure it out. Not knowing or having even a glimpse of this question and answer within us, within ourselves, is the root cause of unhealthy conditions. It's the root cause of sadness, depression, anger, irritability, and so forth. So if we want to be healthy, if we want to be healthy in body, mind, and spirit, balanced, then we need to understand these 2 questions. And this is for everybody. This is a one-size-fits-all. It's find your true self through self-inquiry. Who are you? Why are you here? Whether if you do it through a religious approach or you do it through a non-religious approach, a philosophical way, it's up to you. But you must deal with this truth at some point. And if you don't deal with this truth, the school of hard knocks is going to come get you through body ailments, through mental imbalances, mental, psychological, emotional imbalances. So this is the easiest approach, and generally speaking, to be able to take this further. And that it actually would benefit everybody. At some point, if you do come to Ayurveda, you will have to deal with this topic. This is usually the point of discussion at the very beginning. We must get this right. We must awaken people to the truth. We must deprogram people of the ego and what they have been misprogrammed with. So propaganda and all that junk in the trunk that people believe who they are because somebody else has told them since a child. They may be in the wrong career, they may be in the wrong relationship, they may be in the wrong friendships, in the wrong geographies, because somebody has held them hostage to do that. They're in a wheel like a mouse. They need to get off the mouse wheel and look at where they're at deeply and realize that they have something else to do in this life, that they are somebody else. This is what I want to leave everybody with, because this is the root of health. Swasta, in this science, the word swasta in Sanskrit is self, or being the self. And swasta is also interpreted as health. So we got to be in the self, meaning the spirit or soul, to be able to have true health of all types. And the biggest wealth is health. The biggest wealth is wisdom of this truth. So wisdom, wealth, and health is founded on purpose. These are the 4 pillars that I started that discussion with. In my own way, I have translated them into purpose, health, wealth, and awareness. Purpose, health, wealth, and awareness is what people need to come to terms with. How do you do it? With that little exercise in the morning of before waking up, truly understanding what has happened over the last 8 hours of sleep. What's about to transpire in the next few seconds when you start to move the body, when you start to increase the volatility of the mind. Through that observation, in that interim of awake and asleep, and sleep awake, that observation, that analysis, that self-contemplation is the perfect sense for people. What happens when we are asleep? What happens when we're awake? It's really the opposite. When we're awake, the spirit is dead, disconnected. Not dead, disconnected. Like a zombie, robot, the ego takes over. When we're asleep, the body and the ego is a little bit asleep. and the spirit awakens. You see? So when we're awake, we're really asleep like a zombie, running out of programming, running out of routine, out of habits, out of reactions, instead of proper responses. So this is the dichotomy of life for most people. So instead of having two lives, living two lives, you need to live one life, all 24 hours a day. You see? If you're always connected to spirit, when you're awake, the spirit is in charge of the body and mind, and the teenager, the ego. And when you're asleep, the spirit is awake still. The spirit doesn't need sleep. This is the biggest challenge for people. And this is the root cause of illness, physical and mental, emotional. This is the root cause of illness. Living life like a zombie, out of pure programming at the ego level, not connected to the true spirit. Capiche?
I think that's as good of a note to end on as could be. That's well, everything you've said, especially your conclusion too, very insightful, very helpful. Thank you so much, Dr. Ashwin. Where can people find more about you if they want to come to you? Any additional information about what you offer? Where can people reach out?
They can find me through my mobile, 323-702-1211, or they can find me through my website, ashwinayurveda.com. Perhaps one of your producers can add that to the podcast.
Yeah, we'll put that.
So these are the two practical ways. And, we have an open door policy in this science, so they can reach out.
Perfect. I'll be sure to include that. Thank you again very much, Dr. Ashwin.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Namaste.